Mosul, the administrative capital of Nineveh province in Iraq. Rayhan, a 24-year-old ethnic Yazidi, has travelled over 120 kilometres from Sinjar to renew her passport. In vain.
My father is missing. His residence certificate dates back from 2014 or before. They said it wouldn't work because it's too old. So I have to get a new residence certificate for my mother or a new one for me, and then they'll issue the passport. My mother lives in Canada. I want to go with her.
Rayhan was kidnapped when she was 14 by the Islamic State group and was sold as a slave here in Mosul. She returned to her family less than a year ago, but now wants to leave the country as soon as possible. Everything here reminds her of her captivity, including the names of the towns she passes through on her way back to Sinjar.
They captured us at Hardan's crossroad, and they took us to el-Shababik, and from there they took us to Tel Afar, to a school there, then to the Badosh prison. The Islamic State group was taking the young women and girls one by one.
Before arriving in Hardan, her home village, you have to pass over the crossroads where she was abducted. Here, 3 of her 8 brothers were killed, along with around 60 other men.
When they took us, my brother and I were crying. We were young.
Here in Hardan village, you cannot find a home that was not attacked, that didn't lose a brother, a mother, or a father. A great tragedy fell on Hardan.
Shihab was fighting against the Islamic State group at the time. He says the surrounding Arab villages remain a potential threat to Yazidis, but he also wanted to return to the land of his grandparents.
I don't want to leave the village and give the enemy a chance.
After her capture, Rayhan was taken to Syria, where she stayed for 4 years. In 2018, she took advantage of the disarray in the Islamic State group and reached Turkey on foot. She lived in hiding there with another survivor, until last year, when she found her brother Shihab on social media.
I contacted him through Facebook. I sent him a friend request. He accepted it. He was looking for me. He had been waiting for that day for a long time. But when we were in the hands of the Islamic State group, they were telling us that if we were to go back to our families, the Yazidis, they would kill us. So we were scared of that, of coming back here.
She was unaware that a Yazidi law had been enacted to protect survivors from any consequences for marrying outside the community. Rayhan has had enough of talking about her captivity and her forced marriage.
What happened to me happened to all the Yazidi women. I lost everything, but I came back to life.
This return to life is still paved with obstacles. The trauma of years of violence, sexual slavery, and for some, childbirth in these circumstances remain painful memories for survivors. Akhlas and Suham were held by the Islamic State group for 3 months and 3 years respectively. They often meet up to offer each other support.
As survivors, we don't ask questions to those who are in the hands of the Islamic State group. Questions tend to bother them, so we talk about their current situation.
First survivors' rights, then their mental health.
Someone who stayed captive for 10 years or so, of course their situation is more difficult than mine. They stayed longer, so we have to help them step by step until they can return to a normal life.
Suham has been trying to leave Iraq, but her visa application was rejected. The reason given is that there is a reduced level of threat, but the past violence is still on everyone's minds. The Islamic State group left indelible marks. Like here on the outskirts of Sinjar city, these fenced-off mass graves are believed to contain the bodies of around 100 people.
This lies in a valley, so rainwater from the hills has washed away a lot of the remains. Even wild animals took a few before we installed the fences. Here, for example, you can clearly see a body with clothing.
32 mass graves like this one have not yet been excavated from the 92 sites identified in Sinjar. In total, around 2,600 people are still missing. Khairi has been trying to use his human rights NGO to get the demands of the Yazidi population heard.
Advocacy is very important for the Yazidi genocide file. 10 years after the genocide, there are still a lot of files that haven't been processed by the government. The kidnapped people, the missing people. There are also issues around reconstruction and displacement, which also require substantial support.
The Yazidi community is still waiting for Baghdad to legally recognize the genocide. That would allow the families of the victims to be compensated and those responsible to be tried for the crime of genocide. But legislation has been slow in coming. And here, the scars left by the war are fueling fears that it could happen again. On the road to Mount Sinjar, these abandoned clothes are a constant reminder of the terror of those who fled the Islamic State group. In August 2014, between 35 and 50,000 Yazidis climbed these slopes under the scorching sun. Only about 15 families lived on the summit at the time. Farmers and agricultural workers like Pierre Shakya.
About 400 families gathered here. Some of them stayed for 5, 6, 7 years, relying on this water and this orchard. We let them take what they wanted from the orchard and all the livestock. When they ran out of food, we slaughtered the livestock and ate all the produce from these fields. If it wasn't for this well, many people would have died. The water was worth more than gold and dollars. I swear, if a child got hold of a bottle of water, they wouldn't have sold it for $5,000.
These gutted tents were abandoned by those who fled further afield to Syria and then to Iraqi Kurdistan. Around 300 families have remained. Solid walls have started to replace the tents, despite the economic difficulties. An unfinished building is better than the uncertainty of returning, says its owner, who doesn't want to show his face.
If the government supports us and builds our houses and repairs the wells, we will return. But we cannot, because that requires a lot of money. The situation is also not 100% safe. There are concerns. We got used to the place here, so we thought, let's just stay here in the middle of the mountains. Down in the valley, there is a lot of fear.
His nephew, father of 3 Hassan, works on this building site.
We work on credit, which means we don't get our salary directly. Like now, when we're working on my uncle's house. Generally, the region is struggling financially, which means a lack of work.
He currently works around 2 construction sites a month, but needs at least 3 times that to support his family of 5. Staying in the camp is his only option for the time being.
We didn't go to Kurdistan and stayed here. We thought that we would return to our lands within a month or 2. Planes were dropping food and nylon tents. All those who stayed here don't have a place to return to. I didn't choose to stay living in a tent for 10 years.
Together with his neighbour and cousin, Abu Khairi, they worry about the rising tensions between the refugees and the longer-term residents of Sadashti.
This land belongs to people, and they want us to leave it. If they manage to get us off their land, we will have to go somewhere else.
Somewhere else for them would mean staying in the mountains. Rebuilding in the valley would be too expensive, and they haven't been able to benefit from the government aid offered to encourage people to return to the province. Distributed until the 30th of July, the aid was only available to displaced people living in refugee camps in Kurdistan. On this day at the beginning of summer, more than 300 families had turned up hoping to collect a cheque for 4 million Iraqi dinar, worth almost 3,000 euros. Household electrical appliances are also being distributed. This aid is significant for these families. Most of them have just spent 10 years in refugee camps.
This financial aid is distributed to support families and encourage the return of those displaced and the closure of the camps. Sinjar requires big government efforts as it suffers significant destruction and infrastructure damage.
These soldiers then interrupted. The climate of mistrust in Sinjar is clear. It's due to the presence of multiple armed factions, including the Kurdistan Workers' Party, a Turkish Kurdish independence organization now banned in Iraq. A brief check, but enough to worry the assembly. One young man outside agrees to talk about the limits of the government aid on condition of anonymity.
You can take the check to the bank and deposit the 4 million. But before collecting the check, you'll have to spend $1 million in fees and transport. I need between 25 and 30 million to complete my house, just in order to make it livable, not even for a luxurious house.
Despite the obstacles, between 130,000 and 150,000 people have returned home since January. The local economy is gradually picking up, but still feeble. Most traders need financial support from international organizations. Kairi Ibrahim collects and passes on their grievances.
Go ahead, sir, tell me.
Air from using fans is too hot. If we had air conditioners to cool the fruits, we could store them longer and sell them at reasonable prices to help people. We'd appreciate it if you could inform the organizations about this.
We will.
For Dilshad, the arrival of fruits and vegetables from the region on his stalls is a symbol life has returned to the province. The potential of a new horizon for the generations of Yazidis born after the genocide, who now embody the hope of a restored Sinjar.